Her husband sold her for being childless, until a widowed cowboy with 3 kids said, "She's mine now." The late evening sun bled across the dry Texas horizon as the auction bell clanged, its sharp metallic ring cutting through the restless murmurs of the gathered men. Dust rose in a slow swirl around boots, wagon wheels, and restless horses, all crowded around the wooden platform built for livestock, tools, and now, something far darker. Clara stood on that platform, hands bound in front of her with a thin rope that wasn't tight enough to hurt, but humiliating enough to make her lower her eyes. The wind lifted strands of her hair, pushing them across her flushed cheeks as she fought the urge to tremble. She'd been many things in her life: a wife, a homemaker, a hopeful future mother, but never had she imagined she'd be treated like property. Not because she committed a crime, not because she dishonored her home, not because she deserved punishment, but because she was childless. Her husband Samuel stood at the edge of the platform, arms crossed, posture proud, as if he were doing the town a favor. He didn't look at her, not once. His eyes scanned the crowd instead, calculating, cold, eager for offers. Clara swallowed, heat rising up her throat, but she kept her shoulders straight. She had learned long ago that collapsing never protected a woman. Only dignity did. The auction master cleared his throat and shouted, "This here woman is sound, healthy, obedient, and ready for a new home. Her former husband no longer has use for her. Let's start at $15. The crowd shifted. Some men snickered. Some whispered. Some looked away in discomfort. Clara lifted her chin. She would not break in front of them. Before we go further, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And if you enjoy these deep Western romance stories, make sure to subscribe. It helps the channel grow and keeps these stories coming. The auction master continued. She cooks, cleans, sews, and keeps a tidy home. Any man here looking for a good wife? I ain't paying for a barren woman, one man muttered loudly. A few others laughed under their breath. Clara's throat tightened. The word barren struck like a lash, a label pinned to her without mercy. $10. Another man finally called, raising his hand. A wave of relief and shame swept over Clara at the same time. Being bid on meant she wouldn't be tossed into the streets or forced into labor camps. But being valued at so little. Samuel nodded approvingly, as if that were a fair number. The auction master scanned the crowd. $10. Do I hear 11? Silence. Clara's pulse throbbed in her ears. She didn't want to belong to that man. She didn't even know him, but she had no choice. Her fate no longer belonged to her. Then, a horse's hooves thudded against the dirt. Slow, steady, purposeful. Heads turned. A tall man rode toward the crowd on a dark chestnut horse, dust rising behind him like a small storm. He wore a worn leather coat, hat pulled low, boots covered in trailed dust. His posture was strong, confident, not arrogant, but sure of himself. A man used to the open range. But there was one thing that made him stand out instantly. 3 children sat in the wagon behind him. 2 boys, maybe 10 and 12, and a small girl not older than 6, her hands gripping the wooden rails as she stared curiously at the scene. The man reined in his horse beside the platform, his gaze lifting to Clara. For the first time that day, someone looked at her without disgust, without judgment, without pity, just looking, seeing. The auction master cleared his throat. Luke Carver? Didn't expect to see you today. A ripple spread through the crowd, whispers of recognition. Luke Carver, the widower, the rancher who lost his wife 2 years ago, the man raising 3 children alone on a stretch of hard land. Luke's voice was low, steady. I'll give you 20. The crowd murmured. The man who bid 10 dropped his hand immediately. Clara blinked, certain she misheard. 20. Twice the opening bid. Samuel finally looked at Luke, irritation flashing in his eyes. He stepped forward. You're paying too much for a woman who can't give you another child. Luke didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on Clara, warm, steady, assessing her strength, not her flaws. Wasn't planning on buying a womb, Luke said calmly. Just a human being. The crowd fell silent. The auction master looked around. $20, going once, twice. Samuel snorted. Take her then. She'll disappoint you like she disappointed me. Luke's jaw tightened. That was the first flicker of anger Clara saw in him. But he kept his voice even. I'll be the judge of that. Sold, the auction master shouted, striking the bell. The rope around Clara's wrists was cut. She stood there, stunned, breath catching in her chest, as Luke stepped closer, removing his hat with quiet respect. Ma'am, he said gently, you don't owe me fear. I just didn't like the way they were talking about you. Clara's voice wavered. You don't even know me. No, Luke replied. But I don't need to know a woman to know she ain't livestock. Her throat tightened. A painful, unexpected warmth rose inside her, something she hadn't felt in months. Dignity, safety, hope. Luke stepped down from his horse and offered his hand to help her off the platform. She hesitated, not because she feared him, but because no man had extended a hand to her with such softness in a long time. Finally, she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, warm. He guided her toward his wagon, glancing back only once to glare at Samuel, a silent promise that Clara would never again be spoken of as property. The children in the wagon watched her with wide, curious eyes. Luke helped her climb in, then tied the horse reins and signaled the wagon forward. As the wheels rolled away, Clara took one last look at the platform where her life had crumbled and wondered if it might finally rebuild, not as a possession, not as a burden, but as someone worth choosing. The wagon creaked along the dirt road as Red Creek faded behind them, swallowed by open plains and hills dotted with cattle. Clara sat on the wooden bench beside Luke's daughter, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She wasn't sure whether she should speak, or stay silent, or apologize for something she hadn't yet done. Years with Samuel had carved fear into her bones, the kind that made a woman shrink even when she wanted to stand tall. Luke's youngest, Emma, was the first to break the quiet. She leaned forward, peeking up at Clara with wide hazel eyes. Pa, is she gonna stay with us? Luke flicked a quick glance over his shoulder. For now, sweetheart. She's a guest. Clara's heart softened at the word. Guest. Not purchase. Not burden. Guest. The older boy, Daniel, narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Where'd she come from? Luke answered plainly, town. Daniel frowned harder. Why was she in town? Luke's jaw flexed. Because some men don't know how to treat a woman right. The boy fell silent, absorbing that. Clara felt her stomach twist, not in fear of the children, but in the strange ache of being treated more gently by a family of strangers than by the man who once vowed to love her. Emma suddenly reached for Clara's hand. You can sit by me. I don't mind. Clara blinked back a sting of emotion. Thank you, darling. Luke didn't turn, but she saw the way his shoulders eased, as if Emma's kindness meant something deeply to him. They rode for several minutes before Luke finally spoke again, voice calm, steady. Miss, do you got a name? Or something you'd like me to call you? She nodded softly. Clara. Luke nodded. Well, Clara, if you have questions about where we're going or what comes next, you can ask. You ain't got to sit there scared. Her breath caught. I'm not scared of you. Luke lifted an eyebrow slightly. I can see you're scared of something. Clara lowered her eyes. I don't know how to be anymore. Silence slipped between them. Not heavy, just honest. Luke's voice softened. You ain't gotta be anything. Not today. She swallowed hard, turning her face toward the rolling fields. The sky stretched endlessly ahead, a freedom that felt too big for her fractured heart. An hour later, the wagon approached a long wooden fence line stretching across a valley. Cattle grazed lazily in golden patches of grass. A barn rose to the left, weathered but sturdy. Beyond that stood a two-story ranch house painted white, its porch full of rocking chairs and hanging lanterns. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of cedar wood. Luke slowed the wagon. This is my land. Carver Ranch. Clara's breath hitched. She had never lived anywhere so vast. Emma clapped her hands. Home. Clara watched the children hop down as soon as the wagon stopped. Daniel ran toward the corral. Emma bolted toward the porch, shouting for someone inside. The middle boy, Matthew, stayed back, giving Clara one long, guarded look. Luke stepped to her side, offering his hand again. Take your time. She placed her palm in his, stepping onto the soft dirt. When her boots touched the ground, she suddenly felt how shaky her knees were. Luke steadied her without comment. Inside the house, the scent of stew and fresh bread drifted from the kitchen. A woman in her 50s, gray hair braided and pinned back, turned from the stove with a warm smile. "Well, look who finally came back," she said. "Luke Carver, you bringin' home strays again?" Luke smirked. "Evenin', Martha." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "Who's this lovely thing?" The question stole Clara's breath. Lovely thing. She hadn't heard anything close to a compliment in years. Luke cleared his throat. "This is Clara. She'll be staying here for a while." Martha nodded once. Eyes softened with understanding. "You poor dear. Come sit. You look hungry and worn." Clara shook her head instinctively. "Oh no, I don't want to trouble." "Hush," Martha said kindly. "Women don't trouble me. Men do. Sit." Clara couldn't help it. She smiled. A small, fragile smile, but real. Luke's eyes caught it. And for a moment, the world paused. She took a seat at the kitchen table, the warmth of the room slowly unknotting her tense shoulders. Martha filled a bowl with hearty beef stew, placed a hunk of bread beside it, and slid it toward her. Clara hesitated. At Samuel's house, she ate last, if there was anything left at all. Luke noticed. "Eat." She nodded, lifting a spoon shakily. The first sip burned her tongue, but the flavor, rich, smoky, comforting, brought tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, hoping no one saw. But Luke saw. He always saw. Martha poured coffee for Luke and for herself. "What happened in town?" Luke didn't want to say it in front of the children, so he stepped to the doorway. Martha followed. Clara pretended not to listen, but every word reached her. "He sold her," Luke said quietly. Martha's gasp was sharp. "Dear Lord." "For being childless." A long silence. Martha whispered, voice thick with disgust. "Men like that. God forgive me, but I've seen rattlesnakes show more loyalty." Luke exhaled slowly. She looked like she was about to collapse out there. Martha nodded. "So you brought her home." Luke didn't respond. He didn't need to. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat, staring down at the steam rising from her bowl. Hearing it spoken aloud, being sold, traded, discarded, it hurt worse than she expected. But hearing Luke defend her, hearing him stand against the cruelty she'd lived under, it softened a part of her she thought was dead. Suddenly, Matthew appeared beside her chair, clutching a wooden horse toy. He studied her carefully, then asked, "Are you going to leave too? Like Mom?" Clara froze. Luke stiffened in the doorway. Martha rushed forward. "Matthew." "No," Luke interrupted softly. "Let him ask." Clara met the little boy's eyes. They were full of a pain she understood too well. She knelt slowly beside him. "I don't know how long I'm staying," she said honestly. "But if I do leave someday, it won't be because I wanted to. And it won't be because of you." Matthew's lip trembled. Then he wrapped his small arms around her. The hug stole her breath. Luke looked away, a shadow crossing his face, grief mixed with something softer. Something hopeful. When Matthew pulled back, Clara wiped his tears gently with her sleeve. Luke cleared his throat. "You all right?" Clara nodded, though her heart felt swollen. "Yes." Luke held her gaze for a moment, long, steady, unguarded, before turning away. Martha clapped her hands. "Bedrooms are upstairs. Clara, I'll show you where you'll sleep." Luke added quietly, "You'll be safe here." Clara met his eyes. For the first time in a long time, she believed someone. Clara's room was small, but warm, a quilted bed beneath the window, a wooden dresser with hand-carved flowers, and a braided rug that softened her steps. Martha's hands had clearly touched every part of the space, shaping it into something gentle, lived in, safe. When Martha left her to rest, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing the quilt patterns. She had slept in houses bigger than this one. Samuel's home was large, cold, and full of empty rooms. But this felt like the first place made for an actual human heart. Outside her window, she could hear the faint sound of cattle, the rhythmic thud of a hammer somewhere on the ranch, and the soft laughter of Emma playing in the yard. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. But the moment didn't stay soft, because memories never let her rest for long. Samuel's voice pushed into her mind, cruel, sharp. Useless. I married a barren woman. What's the point of a wife who can't give a man an heir? You're nothing but dead weight in my house. Her chest tightened. Clara dug her nails into her palms until the sting pulled her back to the present. She took a slow breath. This was a new place, new people, a new life, even if temporary. A knock sounded at the door. Clara straightened herself quickly. Come in. Luke stepped inside, stopping just past the doorway so as not to crowd her. He held his hat in one hand, thumb brushing the brim, a nervous habit she was seeing for the first time. Didn't mean to disturb you, he said softly. Just wanted to be sure you settled in all right. She nodded. It's more than I expected. Luke nodded once, like he was relieved. Good. He hesitated, shifting his hat from one hand to the other. The children can be a handful, especially the boys. But they won't trouble you none. They haven't, Clara said quickly. They've been kinder than I deserve. Luke looked at her sharply. You deserve kindness like anybody else. Clara dropped her gaze. Not everyone thinks so. Luke's jaw tightened. Your husband didn't think so. Doesn't mean he was right. The way he said husband sounded like he was swallowing splinters. Clara tried to change the subject. Martha said I should rest, but if there's anything that needs doing. Luke shook his head. You don't owe us a thing. But I want to help, she insisted softly. Luke exhaled slowly. If you're set on it, you can sit with us for supper. That'd be help enough for now. She smiled faintly. I think I can manage that. He tipped his hat, backed out with the same respect he'd entered, and closed the door gently behind him. Only after he left did Clara realize she was holding her breath. Supper that evening was a louder affair than Clara was used to. The table was long, mismatched chairs crowded around it. The children talked over one another, stories about chores, cows escaping fences, Emma losing a tooth, Matthew carving a horse from old wood. Luke listened quietly, occasionally asking questions or nudging them back to order. His presence kept the room grounded, steady. He didn't dominate the table, he anchored it. Clara kept her eyes down and her hands folded, afraid she might interrupt something precious. She was used to eating in silence, to being spoken at, not with. But tonight, silence wasn't demanded. After a few minutes, Martha placed a basket of warm biscuits in front of Clara. You gonna eat, honey, or you planning to admire the bread all night? Clara flushed. Sorry, No apologizing, Martha said. Luke's voice added gently, eat. Clara obeyed, taking small bites. And slowly, her shoulders eased. Emma leaned across the table, whispering loudly, Do you know any songs? Clara blinked. Songs? Ma used to sing, Daniel said quietly. Not all the time. Just when she brushed Emma's hair. Or when she made bread. Clara's throat tightened again at the mention of their mother. She placed her spoon down. I might know a few. Emma bounced in her seat. Sing one. Emma, Luke warned softly, she just got here. Let her settle. Clara lifted a hand gently. It's all right. Maybe after supper, if that's okay. Emma beamed. Daniel relaxed a little, and even Matthew cracked a small smile. Luke looked at Clara, deeply, quietly, and nodded once in gratitude. That'd mean a lot to them. To them, not to him. But Clara wasn't blind. She saw the way his eyes softened when he said it. Later, when the sun dipped behind the hills and supper was done, Clara sat on a rocking chair outside with the children gathered around her. Fireflies winked in the tall grass. The breeze carried the warm scent of cedar and the distant sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She cleared her throat softly and began humming an old lullaby her own mother used to sing, a melody she hadn't heard in years. Her voice was light at first, fragile from disuse. But the children quieted instantly, listening with wide eyes, leaning closer. Even Daniel, who had spent the entire evening watching her with suspicion, sat still. Clara let the tune rise, carrying the soft ache of memory. Her mother, a kitchen full of warmth, a childhood before Samuel. When she finished, Emma clapped, Matthew sighed happily, and Daniel whispered, Can you do another? Clara's heart trembled, a small, delicate thing waking up again. She nodded. Just one more. She began a second song, but halfway through, she sensed someone standing in the shadows. Luke. He leaned against a porch beam, arms crossed, silent, watching his children, not her, listening with peace she hadn't seen on his face before. When she finished, he spoke quietly. They haven't sat still like that in a long time. Clara lowered her eyes shyly. I'm glad they liked it. Luke stepped closer, but slowly, giving her space. You got a gift. A real gentle one. Clara tensed. Samuel said my voice was annoying. Luke frowned deeply. Then Samuel was a fool. The words hit her harder than he realized. Luke shifted his weight. You don't have to believe me. Not now. But there's nothing wrong with you, Clara. Nothing. Her breath trembled. She didn't know what to say. Luke cleared his throat, looking away awkwardly. It's getting late. You should rest. Tomorrow's a new day. She nodded. Good night. He tipped his hat slightly. Good night, Clara. As she walked inside, she caught one last glimpse of him watching his children, a widowed man trying his best, carrying too much weight on two broad shoulders. And for the first time since her life shattered, she felt the faintest spark of belonging. The Texas night rolled in heavy and restless, clouds piling like dark cattle across the horizon, rumbling low as if warning the world to brace itself. Inside Elias Walker's ranch house, the lamps flickered warm against the wooden walls, but the atmosphere was anything except calm. There was a charge in the air, something brewing between Elias and Clara that neither dared name yet. Clara stood by the kitchen basin, sleeves rolled, hair loosely tied, the faint scent of biscuits and wild sage lingering around her. She had never felt this settled or this scared of losing it. Elias sat at the table, sharpening a pocket knife, pretending to be casual but failing miserably. You've been quiet today, he said, not looking up. You too, she replied softly. He swallowed, set the knife aside, and finally met her eyes. Those kind, storm-soft eyes he had come to rely on more than whiskey or sleep. I'm trying not to scare you off, he murmured. She blinked. And why would you scare me off? Elias rubbed the back of his neck. Because I feel something growing here. And things that grow, well, they can get taken away. Her heart twisted. So that was it. His fear wasn't her supposed barrenness. It was his history of loss. Before she could answer, thunder cracked outside, sharp and violent. The house shuddered. Elias shot to his feet. Storm's coming. A rough one. The windows rattled hard enough to make Clara flinch. She had lived through harsh winters and brutal winds, but nothing like a Texas lightning storm. He noticed her trembling. Clara, he said, stepping close in that slow, deliberate way of his. I ain't gonna let nothing happen to you. Not ever. And for the first time, she believed him. The front door slammed open and little Jonah stumbled inside, soaked to the bone. Pa. Lightning hit the north fence. Cattle re-scattering. Elias cursed under his breath. Get your sisters inside now. Clara knelt as the two girls rushed in crying, mud on their hems, hair plastered to their cheeks. She wrapped them in towels, soothing them with quiet words while Elias grabbed his coat and rope. Jonah looked terrified. Clara put her hands on his shoulders. Your father needs a brave right-hand man. Are you that boy? Jonah straightened instantly. Yes, ma'am. Go, she said, handing him Elias's spare slicker. But stay close to your father. Elias watched the exchange, watched how she steadied the children with nothing but a whisper. And something inside him shifted, deep and firm. That's a mother, he thought, whether she can bear children or not. He didn't say it, but the truth landed hard. The storm hit full force, wind howling like a living creature, thunder shaking the ground itself. Elias and Jonah rode out into the rain-filled darkness, chasing scattered cattle. Clara stayed inside with the girls, lighting lamps, checking windows, keeping her voice even for their sake even when her hands shook. She wasn't afraid of storms. She was afraid of losing the first place she'd ever felt wanted. Lightning flashed white against the windows. Then came a knock. Hard. Urgent. For half a breath, she thought, hoped, it was Elias returning early. But no, Elias always called out before entering. Clara cracked the door open and froze. Henry, her former husband, soaked, drunk, smiling that crooked, hateful smile that once ruled her life. Well, ain't this something, he slurred. My wife playing house with another man. Clara's stomach twisted. Henry, you need to leave. Oh, I ain't leaving. He looked past her at the girls hiding behind her. Seems you're real cozy here. But word travels fast. Folks said you were living with some widower. Thought I'd come collect what's mine. Clara stepped fully in front of the girls, arms shielding them. You sold me, she whispered. I'm not yours. Henry laughed in her face. Sold you, yes. But there weren't no papers saying it was final. Clara trembled, not from fear, but fury. You don't get to walk into my life again. Not after the things you did. Not after. His hand cracked across her face. She fell, tasting blood. The girl screamed. Henry shoved past her. Pack your things. We're leaving. Clara crawled toward the hearth poker, fingers slipping on the wooden floor. Touch those girls, she whispered. And I swear. The front door crashed open again. Lightning lit the room behind Elias as he strode in, drenched, breath heaving, jaw clenched so hard it looked carved from stone. Jonah stood behind him, wide-eyed. Elias saw it all at once. Clara on the floor, the girls trembling, Henry towering over her. Something feral and unstoppable broke loose inside him. You got 3 seconds, Elias growled, stepping forward. To take your filthy hands off her. Henry sneered. This ain't your business. She's my wife. Elias didn't blink. She ain't your nothing. Henry moved first. Elias moved faster. One punch sent Henry crashing into the table, splintering it clean in half. He scrambled, reaching for a bottle, but Jonah kicked it away, breath shaking but stance firm. Don't touch her, Jonah shouted. Elias grabbed Henry by the collar, lifting him halfway off the ground. You raise your hand to her again, he said in a deadly quiet voice, and I'll bury you myself. Henry, finally realizing he'd misjudged the wrong man, stumbled out into the storm, cursing as he disappeared into the darkness. Clara sat trembling as Elias knelt in front of her, cupping her face with infinite gentleness, his thumb brushing the swelling on her cheek. Clara, did he hurt you bad? No, she whispered. Not anymore. He swallowed, thick emotion tightening his voice. You're safe here. With me. With us. Her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of belonging. Elias, I didn't want to lose this. Lose you. He pulled her into his chest, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him breathing. You won't, he murmured into her hair. Not as long as I'm alive. And as the storm raged outside, Clara realized she was finally, truly home. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. The sun broke over the plains in soft gold, catching on every wet blade of grass, every puddle, and every broken fence post. Inside the Walker Ranch house, silence held heavy but not frightening. More like a breath everyone was learning how to release. Clara sat near the hearth, wrapped in a quilt one of the girls had brought her, the side of her face tender but no longer burning. Jonah and the girls hovered close, refusing to let her out of their sight, and she didn't try to hide how comforting it felt. For the first time in her life, someone cared whether she was hurt, and that love wasn't conditional. Elias stood by the doorway, arms crossed, hat dangling from one hand. He looked exhausted, soaked through, hair damp and curling at the ends. But his eyes never left Clara. He hadn't slept. She knew it, and he made no attempt to pretend otherwise. Fences patched, he finally said. Cattle resettled. Clara nodded softly. And Henry rode off before sunrise. He won't be coming back. He paused, jaw tightening. Not while I'm breathing. Clara looked away quickly. The promise in his voice was too much. Too deep. Too dangerous to the walls she'd spent years building. Jonah came to her side with a glass of water. Miss Clara, you want me to read to you? Pa said I read real good now. Clara smiled, touched. I'd like that, Jonah. He grinned and darted off to find a book, the girls trailing behind him. Soon their little voices echoed down the hallway, arguing over which story she liked best. Elias stepped closer when they were gone, boots thudding softly on the wooden floor. Clara. She lifted her gaze to him. Yes. The words didn't come easy to him. They rarely did. But when he finally spoke, his voice was steady. You didn't deserve what that man did to you. Not then. Not last night. Not ever. She swallowed, throat tight. Men like Henry don't believe women have worth unless they can give them sons. Elias shook his head hard. He's a fool, then. Clara gave a sad, weary smile. A fool, but a fool who defined my life for years. He doesn't define you here. Her heart squeezed. Elias. He stepped closer still, stopping only when he stood just inches away. She could feel the warmth of him, smell the rain still clinging to his shirt. He reached out like he wanted to touch her, but hesitated, hand trembling before he let it fall. Clara, I don't give a damn if you never give me another child, he said quietly. I ain't looking for someone to fill that space. I got my hands full with the 3 I already have. I'm looking for someone to share my life with, to be safe with, to wake up knowing she's here, because she wants to be. Clara's breath hitched. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Her eyes dropped. What if the whole town talks? What if they say I'm barren and you're a fool for wanting me? Elias reached out and gently tipped her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. Let them talk, he whispered. I'm done living for other people's opinions. Clara couldn't stop the tears then. They slid down her cheeks silently, falling onto his hand. She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling the steady, trembling thump of his heart under her fingers. I don't want to be a burden, she whispered. You're not. You never could be. You're the first good thing that's happened to this family since, he faltered, voice cracking. Since my wife passed. Clara's heart softened like warm clay. Elias, I don't ever want to replace her. You're not replacing her. He cupped the back of her head. You're making a new place. One that's yours. Before she could respond, the girls rushed back into the room, arms full of books, breathless with excitement. Jonah trailed behind, smiling proudly. Miss Clara, we picked Little Women because you're like them, real strong. No, no, the youngest said, tugging on Clara's arm. We want you to read the farm one first. You always laugh at the silly pig. Their chatter filled the room like warm sunlight, and Clara laughed, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. She hugged them close, letting their small arms wrap around her neck. Elias watched the scene, and something inside him settled, like he finally knew where home was. When the children finally drifted outside to play in the soft morning sun, Clara stood and smoothed her dress. I should go pack my things, she said quietly. Things are different now. Elias frowned. Different how? Henry knows where I am. The town is going to talk. I don't want trouble for your children with all the gossip. He stepped directly in front of her. You think I care what this town says? You should, she insisted. People judge women like me. Elias leaned in, voice low, steady, certain. Then let him judge a married woman. She froze. He continued. Clara, I ain't a skin because you're in danger. I ain't a skin to save you from anything. I'm a skin because I want you. Because my children want you. Because this house is better when you're in it. Her lips parted. Elias. He took her hand gently, like she might break. Stay? Not as a guest. Not as someone I'm protecting. Stay as my wife. Emotions surged so hard she could barely breathe. Do you really mean that? More than anything I've ever said. Clara pressed a hand over her mouth, tears coming hot and fast. For years she'd been cast aside, whispered about, sold like property. But here, this man, this home, these children, looked at her like she was the missing piece of their lives. She stepped into Elias's arms and held him tight, her voice cracking against his chest. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll marry you. He wrapped his arms around her, grounding her as if anchoring her to the earth itself. When the children burst back inside minutes later, mud on their shoes and joy on their faces, Elias lifted Clara's hand and kissed it right in front of them. And Jonah, grinning from ear to ear, shouted, See? I told you Pa liked her. The girls squealed and tackled Clara in a hug. And for the first time in her life, Clara knew exactly who she was. Not a barren woman. Not a cast-off. Not something to be sold. She was theirs. And they were hers. A family made by choice, not blood. And this time, she was home for good.